Welcome to Mythos and Murder Manor. Tonight, we uncover the story of a man who smiled at his neighbors by day and stalked his victims by night. It began in the quiet suburbs of Wichita in 1974, when a name was born that would haunt the city for decades: BTK. They called him BTK, bind, torture, kill. 3 words that would forever scar the heart of Wichita, Kansas. 3 words that, for 30 long years, belonged to a man who lived among them, smiling, waving, going to church, and hiding the darkest secret imaginable. Tonight, we step inside the story of Dennis Rader, the family man, church leader, city inspector, and one of America's most methodical serial killers. It began on a cold morning, January 15, 1974. The Otero family lived on a quiet corner of Wichita. Parents Joseph and Julie, and their 2 children, Josephine and Joseph Jr. They were ordinary, kind, and loved. But that morning, their world and the peace of the entire city was destroyed forever. When the eldest Otero children returned home from school, they found something no human should ever see. Their family was gone. Murdered, each bound with cords, each suffocated. The scene was meticulous, ritualistic, and deeply personal. Police couldn't understand who could commit such horror, and why. There were no witnesses, no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. It was as if the killer had appeared from thin air and vanished just as silently. Days turned into weeks, then months. The case went cold. Until, nearly a year later, Wichita's local newspaper received a letter. Written in clumsy handwriting and filled with morbid pride, it described the Otero murders in gruesome detail. Information only the killer could know. At the bottom of the page, he signed with 3 letters: BTK. He explained what they meant: bind them, torture them, kill them. That was his creed, his signature, his purpose. From that moment, BTK wasn't just a killer. He was a phantom who haunted an entire city. Through the late 70s and 80s, his attacks continued. In April 1974, just months after the Oteros, BTK struck again. He broke into the home of a young woman named Catherine Bright. When her brother, Kevin, returned home unexpectedly, Rader shot him twice and stabbed Catherine to death. Kevin survived. His description helped police sketch a man with a normal face. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening. That was the most terrifying part. BTK looked like everyone else. Years went by. Wichita tried to move on. People locked their doors, installed alarms, and whispered about the killer who could still be anywhere. But BTK, he was silent, waiting, watching. Then, in 1977, he resurfaced. His next victim, Shirley Vianne, a young mother of 3. He entered her home, tied her up, and murdered her while her children were locked in another room. The city was in panic once again. He wanted the attention and the power. He wrote more letters. He taunted police, mocked the media, and signed off with his twisted name, BTK, Strangler. By 1978, Rader killed again. Nancy Fox, age 25. He strangled her, left her posed, and then called the police himself to report the murder. When investigators arrived, they found an eerie calm. Everything in the house was neat. The killer had taken his time. And yet, no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. BTK disappeared again. But his ego, his desire for recognition, never left. In 1985, he murdered Maureen Hedge, his neighbor, just a few houses away from his own family home. He even attended her funeral. This was the chilling paradox of Dennis Rader, a man who mowed lawns, raised kids, went to church, and killed in the dark. Through the late 80s and 90s, Wichita lived in uneasy peace. Many thought BTK was dead or in prison for another crime. But Rader was still there, watching news reports about himself, keeping souvenirs from his victims, reliving his power. Then in 2004, 25 years after his last known murder, BTK came back. He sent a package to a local TV station containing photos, victim IDs, and a Word document bragging about his crimes. The police couldn't believe it. They thought the BTK killer was long gone. Now he was taunting them again. The investigation reignited. But Rader had grown arrogant, and that arrogance would become his downfall. In early 2005, BTK sent another message, this time asking police if they could trace a floppy disk. He wrote, "Be honest, can I send you a floppy and not be traced?" The police responded publicly, saying, yes, it would be safe. He believed them. When they received the disk, digital forensics found a hidden clue, a deleted Microsoft Word file that contained metadata linking the file to a Christ Luther church and a man named Dennis. A quick search revealed Dennis Rader, church president and local compliance officer for Park City. He lived just a few miles from all the crime scenes. Police obtained a DNA sample from his daughter's medical record. It matched the semen found at one of the BTK scenes. It was over. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested during his lunch break. After 30 years of silence, Wichita finally met the man who had haunted them. He confessed to everything, 10 murders between 1974 and 1991. In court, he spoke about his killings with chilling calm, describing them as projects. When asked why he did it, he said, "Because I could." He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms. For the families, justice came late, but it came. And for the city, the name BTK finally stopped echoing in the dark. But what makes this story truly terrifying isn't just what Dennis Rader did. It's who he was. He wasn't a drifter or a maniac hiding in the woods. He was the neighbor next door, the man you waved to every morning, a father,
a husband, a church leader. That's what BTK really stands for. The binding of trust, the torture of innocence, the killing of peace.
Now, let's step into our Sherlock segment. When we looked back, the clues were everywhere, just scattered, waiting to be connected. Rader worked as a city compliance officer, meaning he knew local regulations, home layouts, and people's routines. He had access to their information. He kept souvenirs, photographs, and writings, but never shared them until he craved attention. If investigators had focused more on psychological profiling early on, particularly on offenders who craved control and followed the news, they might have narrowed in sooner. The biggest clue, however, was his communication. Every letter, every word, every detail revealed his obsession with validation. A true Sherlock might have predicted that his pride would bring him down. And it did. If he'd stayed silent, BTK might never have been caught. But like every villain obsessed with control, he couldn't resist revealing himself. So tonight, as you turn off the lights and lock your door, think about this. How well do you really know the people around you? Could the person you pass every day, your neighbor, your coworker, your friend, be hiding something darker? I'll leave you with that question. This is Mythos and Murder Manor. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you have theories, thoughts, or other cases you'd like me to investigate, share them in the comments. And remember, monsters don't live under your bed. Sometimes they live right next door.